Okay, so now let's do chapter 17, the subjunctive. Um, Duff emphasizes in this chapter the variety of ways that we can translate the subjunctive into English. But I almost feel like he's putting the cart before the horse and saying there's lots of different English things that we can translate into the subjunctive in Greek. The key thing that he says, though, is on page 190 under 17.1, where he points out that the subjunctive, which is a mood, by the way, I haven't said that yet, the subjunctive mood is the mood of doubtful assertion. The subjunctive is what you use when something isn't certain to have happened or to be going to happen. That doesn't mean it won't happen. And it doesn't even mean that exactly there's doubt that it might happen. It's just the absence of certainty. So let's look at some examples. Again, Duff is emphasizing the variety of English translations, and he's absolutely right about that. But I'm going to show you some English translations that bring in this aspect of doubt. They're often going to overemphasize the doubtful part of it, and I don't mean to do that, except to point out why this is in the subjunctive, to give you a logical reason for it being in the subjunctive. So 1 John 2:1, I am writing these things to you so that you may not sin. That one's pretty obvious. John isn't sure that they're not going to sin, but they haven't sinned yet, and that's his purpose, that they wouldn't sin. 1 Peter 3:18, Christ once for all suffered for sins in order to bring you to God. So I would actually translate that so that he might bring you to God. So again, he's not sure that you're going to get to God, but that is the purpose, and that's the hope that it's going to happen, right? 1 Corinthians 11:27, whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord. Now, this sense of ever is one way that English adds this aspect of uncertainty. But what Greek is saying is, if anyone should, if someone should eat the bread and drink the cup of the Lord, then this is what's going to happen. Just a difference in the way the languages deal with that kind of uncertainty. Whoever eats the bread assumes that somebody is going to, but we don't know who. If he should eat the bread, that assumes also that there are people out there and that some of them might, but we don't know exactly who and how. Mark 6:10, wherever you enter a house. Again, same thing as the previous one. English adds the ever. In Greek, it's if you should enter a house. Titus 3:12, when or whenever I send Artemis to you. And it's kind of the idea here, when I might send. That's really too strong. I've translated it in a way that overemphasizes the doubt, but the point here is the subjunctive is used because he's not sure when he's going to send him. And he said to them, this is Mark 1:38, and he said to them, let us go elsewhere. And that's the way we translate that kind of a phrase. The idea here is we should. This is something that we're talking about together and we're proposing, and let's do it, but we don't have a decision on it yet. Mark 6:24, what should I ask for? Again, this idea of should. Hebrews 10:35, do not throw away your boldness. Another way to translate that would be, you should not throw away your boldness. These kinds in particular, they, in my mind anyway, when it's the pure imperative, it's definitely a command. But when the author is using the subjunctive, the author is softening it a little bit. Revelation 18:21, Babylon, the great city, will be thrown down and will never be found again. This idea of if anyone should look, it won't be found. Now, the What Duff says at the bottom of this page is important too, because he says it's often preceded by a particular word, such as hina or hotan. The most distinctive aspect of the forms of the subjunctive are lengthening vowels. But as we've seen, there's lots of reasons to lengthen vowels. So there are times when the subjunctive is going to look quite a bit like other forms, but we recognize the subjunctive not just by the form. When you see a long vowel, especially a long vowel with a circumflex, you might suspect it's subjunctive. But the second thing you look for is a construction. The word if, the word hina, the word hotan, those kinds of words that signal that the author might be using the subjunctive. He says the subjunctive is the fifth and final mood to learn, and by the end of this chapter you will know the whole of the verb. That's true except for the third person imperatives. Those are still to come. And yeah, there's certain constructions that the subjunctive is used in. It has all three voices, active, middle, and passive, but only the present and the aorist. So you don't have to learn any future. You don't have to learn any imperfect for the subjunctive. It's easy to form. It differs from the indicative only in the lack of augment and in having different endings. But those endings are in fact only a simple permutation on the indicative ones and only come in two patterns. So let me get the Luo table for you and let's look at them on there. So here we have our inflection of luo with the subjunctive filled in. So you can see here that the present tense active forms are just like in the subjunctive, are just like the indicative present tense active forms, except that the vowels are lengthened. Now the first one is already long, so it can't be lengthened. It's just luo. So the only way to tell the subjunctive present from the indicative present in the first person singular is by the context, the words around it. So that makes it a little bit difficult. The subjunctive is not as common as the present though, so always guess indicative if you have to make a choice. Lues, so instead of lues, we have lues with the eta with the I, the Yoda subscript there. And lue becomes lue, again with the Yoda subscript. Luomen becomes luomen, luete becomes luete, and luusin becomes luosin. Similarly, with the middle passive, we have luomai, which becomes luomai. Lue with the Yoda subscript stays, lue with the Yoda subscript. And notice that the third person singular in the active is also the same. So again, you won't be able to tell the difference. Context will have to help you to navigate that. Luetai becomes luetai. Luometha becomes luometha. Lueste becomes lueste. And luontai becomes luontai. Now in the aorist, we have the sigma of the aorist. We have no epsilon augment because it's not the indicative. And remember, outside of the indicative, there are no augments. So no augments, but the sigma. And we have the same endings as the present active. Now notice that this is going to make some overlap with the future indicative. Luceau, for example, is just like the future active indicative, Luceau. But after that, we get these lengthened vowels that are going to distinguish it both from the future active and from the aorist. So we get Luceau, Luces, Luce, Luceaumen, Lucete, Luceausin. And then in the middle, we get the same endings from the middle passive present tense. We get Luceaumai, Luce, and again, here's another one that's the same as the future passive. Luce, Lucetai, Luceometha, Luceste, Lucontai. And then for the aorist passive, we get with the theta, lutho, luthes, luthe, luthomen, and here we get the circumflex accents, luthete, luthosin. Second aorists will be formed with the same endings, but no sigma, just the new second aorist stem, and then these endings. And the subjunctive of a me is actually just the endings, o, es, e, omen, ete, o sin. Same endings, but just with no stem. So let's look at the bottom of page 191, practice 17.2. I think we can just go through them out loud. I don't need to write anything down. But we have agomen. Here we have the regular stem and the regular omen ending, the first endings with the long vowel. So this is just subjunctive present active, and it's a first person plural ending. The second one is pempsosin. Notice the sigma that has been added there, so that tells you it's aorist. The long omega lets you know that it's subjunctive, and so this is aorist, active, third person plural. These are all subjunctive, so I'm not going to keep saying subjunctive, but that would be important when you're parsing it outside of chapter 17. Tele, here we have the couple of choices. It could be the third person singular present active or the second person singular middle passive. Actually, Duff only mentions the present active subjunctive third singular, but the other one is a possibility as well. Erkontai. This is from Erkomai, of course, and we have the third person plural ending with the long vowel. So this is present third person plural middle passive, only this time it's a deponent. So we're just going to call it a deponent. Luthes, we have the theta, and so actually this one is on our chart. It's the aorist passive second person singular. Aposin, we recognize the second aorist stem, apon, and the osin ending is the active third person plural ending. So we have an aorist active third person plural ending, or verb rather. Number 7 is arcsomai. Here we have arcomai, so we've added the sigma, and the omai ending is not the active ending, but it is the middle endings. And so here we have an aorist middle first person singular. Baletai. We recognize, you know that balo changes its stem to just one lambda when it's in the aorist. So this is definitely a present stem. That tells you it's a present subjunctive. And the ending tells you that it's a third person singular middle passive. Didaske, we have the present stem, didasko, didaske, and so we either have the third person singular active or the second person singular middle passive. Acusete, we have the verb akuo, so we've noticed the sigma added, and then the ete is the active ending, not the middle ending, and so this is an aorist active second person plural. Idomen, we recognize id as the second aorist stem, and the omen is the first person plural active ending. So we have an aorist active first person plural. And then philumen, I forgot to mention verbs with an epsilon in the stem, phileo. They're not going to be any different than regular verbs without an epsilon, because that epsilon is just going to get absorbed into the lengthened vowel that's already there. And so philumen will just look exactly like any other ending. Normally, but the problem is that this isn't an omega, right? This is an omicron upsilon, And so it's actually not a vowel that got lengthened. If this was subjunctive, it would be philomen. And then we would say, oh, well, that's a subjunctive active present. But here, Duff has slipped an indicative verb in. And so we have an indicative present tense, first person plural. And we recognize that because the epsilon of the stem with the omicron of the present active ending is going to make an omicron upsilon, whereas if it had been the subject, we would have an omega, which would just absorb the epsilon and it would be gone. We wouldn't see any trace of it. So philumen has to be indicative. I don't think there were any other, nope, that's everything. We will do the uses of the subjunctive tomorrow. Thanks for listening.